Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today's show is called Rethinking Physical Pain, and I am here with Aaron Kubal. Aaron is a board-certified chiropractic doctor. He focuses on rehabilitation of chronic pain, takes a different approach than a lot of chiropractors. You can find him on social media. He makes fun videos most days on TikTok and Instagram and a bunch of other places. You can also check out his website, which is Twin Cities Rehab-performance.com. It's a long one. We'll link up in the show notes. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
I always like to start with definitions. When the general idea is that pain is bad. And the moment people have pain, they want to stop. They want to go away. Something's broken. Their body's wrecked. And I mean, I don't like pain. Nobody likes pain. But basic definition from an evolutionary perspective, what is pain? Why do we have it? What's the purpose?
We always talk about pain as being protective, at least from a modern perspective on pain and pain science and what beneficial services it provided. It is meant to protect you, at least when things are going the way that we would like them to be going. And then for me as a clinician, the way I look at pain, I define pain as whatever the person in front of me says it is. Using their words and acknowledging their beliefs and their understandings and using their metaphors, just because it is such a subjective experience.
Yeah.
And to come from a background and training where we were treating people in pain, using a VAS scale to quantify pain, I think it's disingenuous to force somebody to put a number on their pain and like rate it for you. I think it's better to just talk about it and learn how they're experiencing it. Again, what it means to them, and how it's affecting their life. So to me, it's intended to protect you, and it does a really good job at that until sometimes it becomes a little bit overprotective when symptoms become chronic or persistent. But outside of that, it is whatever the person who is experiencing it says it is.
Yeah. If you're not using a number system, how do you get an idea for what you're dealing with? And I'll give you a specific example. Like when we have people come to classes or trainings or workshops, it's very often that somebody will come up to me and say, Lucas, just to let you know, I have a terrible back. It's horrible. And I would say half the time, what they mean is they really have big problems. And half the time, they're just complaining, life's terrible, work's horrible. So what's really happening? Oh, everything's fine, really. So it's really, I've always used the number thing just to try to get an idea, because I'll have somebody say, my back's horrible. And I was like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're like, well, it's like a 2, I guess, like a 2. And, so what do you use if you're not using numbers? Are you mostly just having a conversation, understanding how it's affecting their life, that kind of thing?
Yeah. It's all purely conversational. And then just from an observation standpoint too, and history taking, because we always have to look at like you said there, if we're going by numbers and you want to try to put everything on a 0 to 10 point scale, well, my 2 isn't your 2 and your 2 isn't my 2. So what does that even really mean? We might as well just talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe observe how it's affecting them. So I always say like, what is the true burden of pain? And because everybody lives with some degree of pain on a daily basis that they tolerate, they don't stress over, it doesn't really affect their lives. So what is the difference then between that type of pain and that type of experience compared to somebody who then feels the need to seek out a healthcare provider? And usually what drives that care seeking behavior is worry, either for in the moment, just not understanding what's going on, being concerned. Maybe it's something serious and they're afraid, or worry for the future. What does this mean for me? Am I going to be, in bad shape down the road? Maybe their parents or family members experience something similar, and now they're starting to take their representation of what that looked like for their loved one and putting it on themselves and saying, is this what I'm going to be? So we talk about worry a lot. And then also, what does it take away from you? Because that's when pain, again, really starts to become burdensome. When it starts to take away certain valued life activities. It's starting to directly impact your behavior. And that is when I say like observationally, taking a look at the person and saying, could I see that they're in pain when they're moving about their day-to-day life? And then just tracking behavior. Like, is there a pattern over the last several years of we're taking away activity or making decisions around pain over the course of time? I think that's a better way to gauge like how burdensome is this really. And then of course, at the end of the day, it is just ask the person because they'll tell you. you know.
I've heard you say that you're not a huge fan of scans, of X-rays or MRIs, these kinds of things. And I wanted to chat with you in the context of like movement. So I had a teacher who used to work for me, and we were doing a workshop once, and she went to a student and she said, "Oh, just need to tell you, you have scoliosis." You know, she's like, "I see your back." And I was like, "Don't ever say that to anyone ever again." The student starts crying. Suddenly the student's manifesting back pain. It's like, who needed to know that? You know, who needed to know that? You know, it's like, you know, like here's a perfect example. You know, your girl asks you how she looks. She looks great. When does she look great? Every day she looks great. She looks great in the morning. She looks great in the evening. There's only one answer to that question. She looks great, right? And with scoliosis, if somebody's where I'm going with this is there are things you need to know, right? You need to know if somebody has a major condition going on. But if somebody's asymptomatic, this woman was playing around in a headstand. She was doing really just fine. Probably she did have scoliosis. She never knew. This information, all it did was open up a whole can of worms. So I'm guessing you have a similar idea with scans, but help people understand, you know, when a scan is appropriate and when it's just potentially looking at stuff that maybe you don't want to look at.
Yeah. So, and obviously like a scan in and of itself is not a bad thing. It does have its place and there's a time and a place for it. But what really is the difference maker, it's not taking the scan per se, but it is the explanation behind what everything on the scan means to the person. And because again, like it always seems to come back to when we're talking about pain, what does this mean to you? When you feel the pain, what are you picturing in your head? And what do you think this is? Why do you think you have pain? And if we trace that back when we're talking about scans to how the scan was explained to the person, that will feed into their interpretation of whatever symptoms they feel. So, and we've got, you know, studies on this. Emma Karan and Lorimer Moseley took a look at like, what is the difference in response and how does it affect people with back pain if they explain the scan where they just tell you what you see and that's it, or they explain the scan from a more contemporary evidence-based model of, you know, these are normal findings. What you see on here is you see this in pretty much everybody, whether they have back pain or not. Yeah. None of this on here is anything to worry about. Your scan does look great, even though there's like stuff, right? So, and they found that when you explained it from that model and just let them know that what they see is normal, things turn out a little bit better. So it does have a direct impact, and it comes back to beliefs, understanding, and just what does that pain represent to them.
So whether you're looking at chiropractic care or body work or Rolfing or acupuncture, there's this really emphasis. Unfortunately, the majority of the industry is that like something about you is broken. It's out of place. Your Lego pieces have unhinged. You know, people come up to me all the time. You know, I have hyperlordosis kyphosis, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, you got great. You look great. Like nothing. You're totally fine. You know, like I just have to tell you, I have osteoarthritis in my spine. I was like, welcome to the club. Like, is it bothering you? Well, no, but you know, the doctor, I went to this chiropractor and one of my legs is longer than the other and he cracked my back. And, there's a real fine line between self-care and kind of holding on to these labels of I am broken in health and nutrition. I am toxic. I have all these toxins in my body. I think it comes back to like these weird Judeo-Christian values that we've kind of superimposed on everything, where there's the heaven and hell and good and evil. And there's the healthy people with perfect posture and they never hunch forward. And there's the perfect people with great posture who never have pain and they don't actually exist. How do you deal with this? Because you're in a profession that's just rife with this kind of struggle where, you know, everybody's has one leg shorter than the other and everybody needs just a quick crack and they'll be fixed. And
it's infuriating too. And I've said for a long time is like my little hot take that we are in and of ourselves chronic pain factories, because what we do,
you're generating it. Yeah.
By and large is we make people feel damaged and we make people feel fearful. Now we don't do that. I say we as if I'm part of that. I mean, I am part of the profession, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody does that spitefully. Like you're not trying to scare somebody. It's not like that. I think what that always comes down to when we make the mistake of attributing pain directly to some kind of structure, because that is a mistake based on our understanding of pain now. When we point to one structure and say that is pain, it's a breakdown in communication every single time. It's just it's an inability to communicate a complex topic to somebody. And you can spin that conversely too, to say, because like, what's my job then? Because I'm getting all the people who have been told all those things.
Yeah.
And I need to offer them that alternate perspective and start shifting those beliefs. If we're going to make any progress at all, somebody's going to have a really hard time making progress the way I approach pain management and rehab if they think their spine is crumbling. So we need to shift those, throughout the course of working together. And I would make just as big of a mistake if in my communication, I completely discounted and discredited those imaging findings.
Sure.
And just said like something like, welcome to the club, everyone has them.
Yeah.
Because the reality of that situation is, as really incidental as those findings are to me, just clinically and decision-making wise, they are not incidental to that person.
Right.
Because for a period of time now, that person has been concerned over them.
Yeah.
It's their x-ray, it's their body, it's what they look like. And it does matter to them, probably more than we would like it to within the context of pain, but to them, it matters. So if I just communicate to them and say, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. That I used to do that. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
What I like better is I've always heard Greg Lehman say, and Greg Lehman's an incredible physiotherapist, chiropractor, strength coach from up in Canada, but I've always heard him say, we treat it like it's like kindling to a fire, right? What you see on the image is like kindling to a fire.
Yeah.
So you've got kindling, but if you have if the fire is pain, you've got kindling, but do you have a fire? No, you've just got one piece. You need other elements for there to actually be pain. So to see that on imaging, that is not enough to explain a pain experience. It's like Lorimer Moseley always says, nociception is both insufficient and unnecessary to actually explain pain or for there to be
what's going
pain.
on. Yeah. So, I've struggled with this. I had my first experience with chiropractic care, 20 years ago or something. I went to a guy and, he told me one of my legs was shorter than the other and popped me and told me I needed 6 sessions and he was going to fix my alignment. And, I went there because I had a hamstring injury and I was like, what does this have to do with anything? I was like, I'm pretty sure my legs are the same length. And so I was really skeptical. And then I started doing this podcast, however many years ago. And some of my best guests, hands down, have been chiropractors. None of them have been talking about cracking backs and none of them have been talking about one leg longer than the other. And there's a couple of observations I've made is that in the field of chiropractic thing, I'd be interested to hear your feedback, but there's just a whole lot of pseudoscience. And then there's a whole lot of people who are actually overcompensating for the pseudoscience and they're really on top of their game. Like, physically fit. Like there seems to be like this trend among chiropractors to like actually take care of themselves. Like it's like, wow, you're in good shape. Also just really, really overeducated in terms of functional medicine and blood tests and things like this, stuff I never get from medical doctors who are on the show. So you get kind of best of both worlds. So I get a lot of students who have back problems. They say, should I go to a chiropractor? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I think you should go to somebody who's good, but you're really rolling the dice because at least half the time you're going to go in there. And I know a guy here in Barcelona and he sees something crazy, like 30, 40 patients a day. He literally has them in the waiting room and he just sends them home, tells them they're broken, tell them their Legos are back in place. It's just like, it feels good. I like getting adjusted, but I'm not naive enough to think that that's doing anything. How do you sort of balance this? You've invested a ton of money, a ton of time. You're, for better or worse, you're in this industry, and yet there's a whole bunch of red flags.
Yeah. Well, that is really funny that you point out. It does seem to be an overcompensation for the ones who are really, really great. Like it's like they're trying to make up for something. And
totally.
I've absolutely felt that as well. Like I've said to people, because people like to ask me, if you could go back, would you have just gone to PT school? I say, no, that doesn't add anything to my scope of practice. And, it doesn't really change things. The only benefit would be you get reimbursed by insurance a little bit better and schooling is cheaper. So what I always point out is like, the only difference for me is that as a chiropractor with the DC at the end of my name, generally speaking, I just have to work a little bit harder compared to the PT or the MD to legitimize myself every time I speak to somebody. So you always feeling the need to like prove myself and to prove that I know what I'm talking about and to prove that I'm not saying things that are crazy and ridiculous because we've just got a track record of saying things that are crazy and ridiculous.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like to your point, some of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing are chiropractors.
Yeah.
And they truly blow my mind. Like, I'm in a group chat with, I think, 6 or 7 different guys who are all leaving the field to go into medicine or to go to PhD and go into research. I'm easily the dumbest person in there. Like, they're incredible. But then on the opposite end, like, we also get practitioners where it's just like practitioners where when people ask me if they should see a chiropractor, or if I have a family member who calls me and said they started seeing one, I will tell them to stop.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them, let me vet that situation first, because I genuinely don't trust it. And I mean, think about that. That's a tough place to be in. And I empathize with my colleagues who also share my evidence-based perspective, because it's not easy to be in a profession that you actually would not recommend family members seeking care from. I would not just blindly say, yeah, go see a chiropractor. I would never tell someone that, because the risk is just way too great that they're going to fall into a bad spot. Now, you can find the best evidence-based clinician in the world, and that's totally possible. But I always tell people, seek out evidence-based providers. Don't get too wrapped up in what their license is.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, there's really, really terrible physical therapists, physiotherapists. I've been to some really bad ones. I mean, they just have you stand on a Bosu ball, and it's like everything's. But the difference is they never told me that one of my legs was shorter than the other, and they didn't use like gimmicks from the 1800s and this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff, because there's really great thinkers. What do you see in terms of the future of chiropractic care? I mean, it seems like it's booming now. Every time I go on YouTube, there's some guy just with a mic next to somebody's neck, just, and somebody says, yes, my spine also is totally unclicked. I need to go get fixed. What is the future? Is it going to die? Is it going to be reformed? Or what do you think?
I mean, what even are we? I don't even know. I mean, just think about the spectrum of chiropractors. Like, you've got some people who are, just making YouTube videos of cracking.
Yeah. And that's their job.
It's like, looking at that, people aren't following those people and watching those clips because they think that person is an incredible provider, an incredible clinician. They're doing it because it's taboo to watch somebody get their neck snapped. And right. So it's like, and then you've got, other ones who, like, some of the best musculoskeletal researchers on the planet are chiropractors.
For sure.
So that's an incredible contribution to society. So it's quite the range. Yeah. And then, you got people like me who are just screaming on the internet for evidence-based practice and adhering to clinical practice guidelines. So it's like, what have we? I don't know where this is going to go. I know what I would like to see. What I would say is one thing that's for sure is TikTok has certainly extended the lifespan of chiropractic by for 50 to 100 years. They just kill it on TikTok. And I would like to give myself a pat on the back as having built a following on there without snapping a single joint. I have not cracked anyone on camera yet, but what I would like for chiropractic, which this will never happen, but I would like for us to be like pain guides or pain coaches. I would like for much less involved as far as what we do with our hands. I would also like for us to take a big focus on, again, advice and reassurance and guidance and communication, because what really is the burden here with things we treat, we're looking at chronic low back pain, which is the most disabling health condition on the planet. There is no greater contributor to disability. So if we just take things like that, grab that, medical doctors, their visits, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, it's not conducive to communicate the information that's needed to handle a case of acute to chronic, whatever, low back pain. Give somebody the adequate advice they need, because best practice advice for back pain just doesn't make sense. Stay active, stay at work, try not to worry too much. Well, back pain can feel very distressing. So unless you've got time to communicate that message and make them understand that, it's probably not going to work. And it's probably going to come across like you hear about medical doctor encounters so often, that they were just dismissed, when really that doctor might have been doing the exact thing they were supposed to. So if we could take on that burden, because we do have an outpatient chiro and PT clinics, we've got that power. You've got that power to sit and talk with a person and see what it means to them and explain things really well. So if we could really own that and offload that burden from the medical system and take those cases and do a much better job of communicating and guiding people back to work, guiding people back to activity, that's what I'd like to see. But that will never, ever, ever happen. Hope is very low.
So let me ask you a different question. So placebo effect is very real, right? The size of your vitamins is going to affect the way that they hit you. I mean, it's a very real thing. It's not something that anybody's created. So the moment we publish this, I'll get emails right away saying, Lucas, stop talking bad about cracky backy. This worked so well for me. It fixed. And the reality is there's nothing to be said for that because like it totally does work for people. There are people who've gone in for 6 adjustments, changed their life. And so my question for you is placebo effect is real. Just being in the context of someone who cares in whatever capacity is real. How can people take advantage of the placebo effect without getting taken advantage of, which I think is what happens a lot when somebody goes in with a back pain. Suddenly they have adrenal fatigue. That was like the popular one. Now it's their thyroid disease or whatever it is. It's like they have these marketing rounds that go in the chiropractic circles. They're like, hey guys, let's sell this to all our back pain clients. And so how can they take advantage of the placebo effect without getting taken advantage of is my question.
Yeah, well, that's great. First of all, the placebo effect is involved in every single intervention ever. Yeah. You can't subtract it from human interaction, just because there are certain implications behind everything, whether spoken or unspoken.
Yeah.
But I always like to point out we do vastly overstate the power of the placebo effect. And it's not actually something that shifts the needle that much. To your example there, 6 sessions over the course of like 6 weeks and the person's life has changed. Well, I think we really need to reconcile here as a profession in chiropractic, the power of natural history and regression to the mean. The truth here is that with most non-serious, non-specific musculoskeletal aches and pains, most of those things are going to resolve on their own. Yeah. Person gets care or not, even if they do nothing within 4 to 8 weeks, right? Well, I've always said our role is we're just trying to minimize risk of this becoming a chronic, long-standing situation.
Sure.
That's how I see it. But really, we just have to look at that and say, okay, if it's going to get better until 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, most of them are probably coming to us around week 2 or 3 when they're starting to get frustrated. You've only got about 4 weeks left to go. And I could take a hamburger patty and rub it on the person. I do, as long as it's lined up in that timeline, it's going to look like I'm the one who resolved that issue. When really they get better in spite of us and we're just there to take all the credit. Yeah. So, I also offer that up. And then I think this is a good point to make too, and I'll try to make this quick, but what we also need to understand is people will say, my big thing is informed consent. It's incredibly important to give a really robust informed consent. And what that means in a healthcare setting is with any intervention or any choice we're about to make, you are told the risks, you are told the benefits, and you are told the effectiveness and efficacy both of it as a standalone and then compared with other options, right? So you as a consumer have all of the information you need to make a really good decision for yourself with your money and your time and your body, right? And the informed consent in a lot of these chiro and PT clinics is savagely broken in that like people aren't told that acupuncture and dry needling have trials where they don't outperform toothpicks that are randomly allocated.
Totally.
And spinal manipulation or cracky backy has JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, studies where it doesn't outperform a cold laser machine that's turned off. We need to share that information with people because that's going to have a role to play in dictating whether they want it or not. That directly impacts the choice they're going to make. So with that being said, students will always ask me, well, if you're being that honest with them and you're telling them those things, aren't you self-sabotaging your own placebo effect? And like I mentioned earlier, the placebo effect is not that powerful. If that is true, if I'm really self-sabotaging with my placebo, which is not the case, because again, no matter what you do, placebo is at play. You don't really have a ton of say over that because it's up to their interpretation. So with that said, like I'm okay running the risk, so to speak, of sabotaging my own placebo effect because what I'm exchanging that for is a very strong therapeutic alliance and a person who trusts me that much more because I just told them the intervention that I might use.
Yeah.
Not that special. And they respect that and they trust you. And having good trust in that therapeutic relationship is going to be a hell of a lot more important than cashing in on a cheap placebo effect. Right. So a little long-winded, but I think that's important.
Yeah, totally. And I've also found that when people understand this might not work, this might actually make it worse. Also, suddenly it's putting the onus on the person, which inevitably it has to be, right? This whole concept of like a healer is just a total misnomer. There is no healer, right? It's just this amazing organism that we have is going to heal itself, perhaps with a couple of coaches, couple of guidance along the way. One last question before we wrap. Pain is generally thought of as bad. Going away of pain, people generally think of as healing. They're not the same thing. And so a classic example is, I'll have a student who had a student recently. I'll give a specific example. And she did something to her shoulder. I don't even know where it was. She comes up after class, my shoulder's hurting. Do you have something to break up the scar tissue? That was her first question. She wanted to break up scar tissue from an injury that happened 10 minutes ago. And then she wants to take painkillers to heal it, and then put ice on it, of course, and compress it and this kind of thing. And it's like, there's so many layers of decades of stuff to unravel there. It's so hard to know even where to begin. Like, that pain you're feeling is not bad. There's no scar tissue at all. Why would we want to break it up? I mean, we're going to pick at a scab that you just, there's so many layers there. It's really, really difficult. And these are the kinds of pain conversations that people have with Google at 12:30 at night. And these are the kind of pain conversations that they have with their healthcare practitioner. Make the pain go away. This is evil. This is bad. Break it up, smash it, squish it, crack it, rub some kind of weird, expensive metal knife on it. The pain's going to disappear. And it's just like, there's so many things there. I feel almost like a jerk just saying like, listen, just leave it alone. Give it a couple of days. See how you feel in a couple of days and we'll talk. Nobody wants to hear that. How do you reconcile that there's just so much of that stuff out there? It's so difficult to break through.
Yeah, it's really challenging. That's why pain is easily my favorite thing to continue learning about,
Sure.
Because it is such a complicated issue.
Yeah.
And it's so subjective, and everybody has their own experience with it, and it touches people's lives very, very differently. So it is my favorite thing to learn about. But what I would say there is, is pain good? Is pain bad? Pain, like I said, pain is whatever it is to the person in front of you, because that answer is going to change depending on who you ask. I think the first step is always just meeting that person where they're at with it. Of course, we as a society have a terribly unhelpful relationship with pain, and all pain, like life in our view, generally speaking, should be the absence of pain, and any pain that occurs should be cut out and removed, and it should not be part of you. But that's just not a realistic expectation. You're not going to live a pain-free life. And if you did, you'd be in grave danger, because again, it is meant to protect you and get you into some harmful situations and change behavior as well. So, with that being said, it really just has to come down to meeting that person where they're at, going into it with an open mind and figuring out, what does this mean to that person? And then it's got to be, and this is what I do with rehab, is it's got to be this journey of experiential learning for people, because people aren't going to shift their perspective on pain just from me lecturing them all day.
Yeah.
And they're certainly not going to shift it if I just look them in the face and tell them that it's not what they think it is.
Yeah.
Who am I to say? Like, they've been living with this pain their whole life. I just found out 5 minutes ago. Like, how dare I try and explain that to them? That is ridiculous. And I agree with them. So it's planting seeds, it's nudging them in directions. And then what I actually do with my rehab is, I'm not looking at, prescribing exercise to strengthen or stretch or elongate or change you structurally. I'm looking to set it up in a way that it's going to jive and line up with my explanations behind what's going on with your sensitivities. So that when you're working through these things on your own, hopefully some light bulbs start to go off as you're put in a variety of different situations where you start to say, oh man, like maybe my back actually is safe in this context, or maybe I actually can handle this, or maybe this isn't quite what I thought it was. But if people can't be given the opportunity to come to those realizations on their own, that is where true change happens. Your own reconceptualizations. It's not just someone, yelling it at you all the time. That's just not how people learn. So, that's what makes this hard. And that's why I said too, like, if we could just grab that, we have the luxury of time to give more robust and person-centered explanations and communicate better. Just if only we would do that. But again, it's an uphill battle. So yeah, it's got to be, you have to at least be willing to meet them halfway and use their words and guide them through that rather than rush them through that and say, it's not what it's not scar tissue. You're fine. Like, can't be that.
Yeah. It's great information, Aaron. For people who want to connect with you and follow you online, tell people where to find you and what you're up to.
Yeah. So, TikTok is definitely where I'm the most active. I think it's just Aaron_Kubal, I'm pretty sure. But, same thing on Instagram. People have a better shot at getting a hold of me on Instagram because I don't have as many DMs there. TikTok DMs are like a lost cause at this point. And then email aaronkubaldc@gmail.com. And then, as you mentioned in the beginning, Twin Cities rehab and performance, or no, Twin Cities rehab I never talk about it and I never promote it. So I sometimes forget the name, but it is an online rehab service that I run. And I do a lot of online coaching with people there. So people just reach out to me and I can usually help them with whatever they want to talk about or need, but any of those mediums are good.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. And let's keep in touch.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Love it.
Chronic lower back pain is estimated to affect as much as 80% of the population at some point in your life. It might happen when you're 25 and snowboarding. It might happen when you're 75 and just retiring from a career. But when back pain strikes, it can be really debilitating. There's lots of different things you can and should do to work on your spine strength and flexibility and balance. The fourth element that doesn't get talked about enough is traction. And traction is the practice of creating literally more space between your vertebrae. You can do this by lying flat, not so practical. You can do this by hanging upside down, like on old school inversion tables or gravity boots. And we've been doing it recently, for the past 10, 11 years, using the yoga trapeze. You hang from your hips and you hang upside down. And it's been so successful, so popular that we have yoga trapeze teachers now in 38 or 39 different countries. We have yoga trapeze students in even more countries, 43 countries or something like that. And we are training teachers actively to work with students all around the world. You can teach private one-on-one. You can teach in gyms and fitness centers. A lot of our trainers now work virtually. They work via Zoom to help clients specifically with their spine. This course is 12 days long. It's live, it's interactive, it's a lot of fun. We walk you through the safety, the setup, the anatomy, the physiology, and all of the business concerns you need as well to get started teaching professionally right away. Whether you're a yoga teacher now or if you're new to teaching, the program will take you all the way from zero all the way to getting your very first client. To learn more about the program, go to yogatrapezeonline.com, yogatrapezeonline.com, and I hope you can join us.
Have a nutritional question from Sarah on Instagram. Sarah says, Lucas, I just did a 10-day lemonade fast where all I drank was lemonade with maple syrup, and I'm feeling great. I've lost some weight, but I know that most people would probably say this wasn't healthy. But like I said, I lost weight and I feel better. So how do I find a balance between what's good, even though people say it's not good? This is a really interesting question. So there's something called the master cleanse, or that people have been doing for a long time, which is you drink lemonade and, lemonade made with lemons and maple syrup. And some people use cayenne pepper, and you just kind of starve yourself for 10 days. Here's what happens with these things. In general, super hydrating your body makes you feel really good. It helps your bowels to move, helps to clean things out. Eating only liquids also can give your digestive system a break. Here's the other thing that tends to happen. I used to lead these juice fasts for years, and we got same thing. We got really great results. I started to shift to like vegetable broth fasts. And here's why. You're still having quite a lot of sugar, quite a lot of carbohydrate. But what I found is when I looked at this, I had the same question. I was like, how are people getting good results with this, eating all this sweet stuff? And what I found is even though people are dumping maple syrup into their lemonade all day, usually for most people, they were still consuming about half the amount of carbohydrate they normally would. What I mean by that is the average person that I meet is eating somewhere between 300 and 500 grams of carbohydrate per day.
And when they'd go on a juice cleanse, a master cleanse, a lemonade fast, they'd end up cutting their carbohydrate intake in half. Now, they're basically living off sugar, which is a little bit funny and not so great for inflammation and a bunch of other things. But they were still cutting their carbohydrate intake in half. And so the net result, as you mentioned, Sarah, can sometimes be positive. The reason I stopped advocating these, because I found I lived in Thailand on an island called Koh Samui, which is kind of like the juice detox fasting center of the universe. At least I've never been to a place that has more of it going on. And I saw these people would come back again and again, every 6 months, every 3 months, at least every year, to starve themselves. And it created this yo-yo cycle. And I've really gotten away from recommending starving yourself in any way, except for very short periods of time or for introspection or some type of other reason. But for health, just to starve yourself, the rebound effects often outweigh any of the benefits that you get. But that's the bad news. The good news is you're feeling good. The good news is you lost some weight. See if you can keep it going. And the way that I do that is switch completely and dump all the carbs, especially that maple syrup, and see if you can get onto a low glycemic, high fiber, lots of fresh veggies and things like that, and see if you can maintain it. For every generalization I make, there are exceptions, and there are certainly people who utilize things like the Master's Cleanser. They use juice fasting to kick off a really healthy lifestyle. So see how you go. We've got a yoga question from listener Bart on Instagram. Bart says, Lucas, I've been doing yoga pretty consistently now for about 3 months, but my wrists are really killing me. I can't really do vinyasa yoga anymore. Do you have any suggestions about props or maybe other styles of yoga that I could try? I'm not sure what to do. Really common that people get wrist pain in yoga classes, especially classes where you're on your hands a lot, like vinyasa classes. In some cases, there are people who just have individual anomalies and it's not for them. That's pretty rare, Bart, and for everyone listening. Usually it's a process of figuring out a couple of things, alignment and then strengthening the muscles that support your wrists, and some flexibility so that you can actually place your hands on the floor without doing so in a wonky alignment that could damage your wrist. In the short term, there are a couple of simple fixes that people do. The simplest one is you bring a couple of blocks with you to class and you practice on top of the blocks with your hands. It reduces the angle on your wrist. It also gives you something to grab onto, which fires up your forearm, which supports your wrist. Some people like to practice on their fists. Some people actually reach around the edge of their mat and grab their mat, like make a fist on their mat itself, and those could be options for you. You might want to take a look at like a grip strength device. I have one sitting on my desk here right now, actually. You squeeze it and it can help with your grip strength. I don't really know if that's the cause. It could be something else altogether, but I would take a look at that. I would also take a look at your wrist alignment. Check in with your teacher. Very often, students turn their hands out too much and they dump into the outside of their wrist, but I wouldn't give up. In the short term, if you want a practice that's less on your hands, traditionally, most hot yoga practices are mostly on your feet with very little down dogs, very little vinyasas, if any. So that can often be a place to turn, but I wouldn't give up. Keep trying. Thanks for listening to The Lucas Rockwood Show. If you enjoy the podcast, I have 2 asks of you. Number 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag me. My handle is @LucasRockwood. Number 2 is please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, every week I send out information about the podcast, behind the scenes stuff, announcements of online classes and special events. I email about once a week. You can do that at yogabody.com/sign me up. And right now we have a free breathing worksheet on that page as well. It's yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.